There's a fruit sitting in most kitchens right now that a lot of people don't even think of as a fat source, and it may be working against your cholesterol numbers every time you eat it. It's not a fruit anyone warns you about. It's not sugary, it's not processed, and it even gets marketed as a healthy choice. I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, why it affects your numbers more after 65 than it did at 40, and the simple, evidence-backed swap that can genuinely help bring your LDL cholesterol down. I'm Dr. John Paul. Before we get into it, I want to be upfront with you. I'm not going to promise you a number I can't back up. You may have seen headlines promising a 50% drop from one swap. That's not realistic, and I'd rather give you something true than something that just sounds impressive. What I can tell you is that this single change is one of the most well-supported, doctor-recommended dietary adjustments for improving cholesterol. And for many people, it makes a real, measurable difference. The fruit, coconut. The fruit in question is coconut, the meat, the milk, the cream, and coconut oil made from it. Botanically, coconut is a fruit, a drupe, like a peach or a mango, just with a very different structure. It's shown up everywhere over the last decade: coconut oil in cooking, coconut milk in coffee and curries, coconut flakes in granola, and baked goods often marketed as a natural or healthy fat. Here's the part that surprises people. Coconut is one of the few plant foods that's extremely high in saturated fat. Ounce for ounce, coconut oil is roughly 90% saturated fat, more saturated fat than butter or lard. And saturated fat is one of the most consistently documented dietary drivers of higher LDL cholesterol, the type most closely linked to plaque buildup in your arteries. Why this matters more after 65. Your body's ability to clear LDL cholesterol from the blood tends to become less efficient with age, partly because the liver's LDL receptors, the docking stations that pull LDL out of circulations, become somewhat less active over time. That means the same amount of saturated fat that barely moved your numbers at 40 can have a bigger effect on your cholesterol at 65 or 70. On top of that, arteries naturally stiffen somewhat with age, so elevated LDL has more opportunity to contribute to plaque formation over the years that follow. None of this means coconut is dangerous in small amounts. It means the cumulative, daily habit matters more now than it used to. The mechanism: when you eat saturated fat, your liver responds by producing more LDL particles and becomes somewhat less efficient at clearing existing LDL from your bloodstream. Do this consistently. A tablespoon of coconut oil in your coffee each morning, coconut milk in your curry a few nights a week, coconut cream in your smoothie, and your baseline LDL can drift upward over months, often without any symptoms at all. You won't feel it. It shows up on a lipid panel, sometimes as a surprise to people who consider themselves healthy eaters. The simple swap, the well-documented fix, isn't to fear fat, it's to change which fat you're reaching for. This is one of the most consistent findings across decades of nutrition research. Replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat, the kind found in olive oil, avocado, and nuts, lowers LDL cholesterol in most people who make the switch. Here's the swap. Food by food. Cooking oil. Replace coconut oil with extra virgin olive oil for most sautéing and roasting. Creaminess in coffee or smoothies. Swap coconut milk or cream for unsweetened almond milk, or add a spoonful of ground flaxseed for creaminess without the saturated fat load. Baking. Where a recipe calls for coconut oil, try avocado oil in equal amounts. It behaves similarly in most baked goods. Snacking. Swap coconut flakes or coconut-based granola bars for a small handful of walnuts or almonds. None of this means eliminating coconut entirely if you enjoy it. An occasional serving isn't the concern. The concern is coconut oil or coconut milk as a daily default fat source, replacing it as your everyday habit. What the research actually shows: multiple long-standing dietary guidelines, including those from the American Heart Associations, recommend replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat specifically because of its consistent effect on LDL cholesterol. Depending on how much saturated fat is being replaced and a person's starting point, people who make this swap the primary change, who came in with an LDL of 165, well above the recommended range, despite what he described as a clean diet. When we went through his week meal by meal, the pattern became clear. Coconut oil for nearly every meal he cooked, coconut milk in his morning coffee, and coconut yogurt most days, all because he'd read that coconut was a heart-healthy superfood. We didn't change his calories or cut his fat intake, we changed the type of fat. Olive oil for cooking, unsweetened almond milk in his coffee, a small handful of walnuts as his afternoon snack instead of coconut clusters. 3 months later, his LDL had dropped to 138, a meaningful, real improvement, achieved with one category of swap and nothing else. Then there was Marjorie, 71, who came to me a little discouraged. Her doctor had flagged her LDL at a follow-up visit, and her first instinct was to assume she'd need medication right away. Marjorie wasn't a big coconut oil user, but she loved a particular brand of coconut-based coffee creamer, using it every single morning. And she baked with coconut oil most weekends because a recipe book she trusted called it the healthiest oil available. Neither habit felt significant to her on its own. That was the whole problem. Small, daily, invisible amounts of saturated fat had been quietly stacking up for years. We made 2 changes. She switched to a small splash of half and half in her coffee, which, in the actual amount she used, contributed far less saturated fat than her healthy coconut creamer had, and she started baking with avocado oil on weekends instead. She also added 2 walnut-topped salads a week, in place of a snack she used to have. At her next lipid panel 4 months later, her LDL had come down enough that her doctor held off on starting medication and agreed to recheck her in 6 months instead. Marjorie's case is a good reminder that this swap isn't only about people who cook with coconut oil constantly. Sometimes it's one small daily habit, repeated for years, that quietly does the work. What to do this week? 1. Check your pantry and fridge for coconut oil, coconut milk, and coconut cream, and notice how often you actually reach for them. 2. Replace your primary cooking oil with extra virgin olive oil for at least the next month. 3. If you drink coffee or smoothies with coconut milk daily, switch to unsweetened almond milk or oat milk for 2 weeks and see how it feels. 4. Swap one coconut-based snack a week for a small handful of walnuts or almonds. 5. If you haven't had a lipid panel in the last year, especially after 65, this is a good time to ask your doctor for one. It's the only way to know whether this swap, or any other, is actually working for you. Before you go, if this kind of honest, evidence-based breakdown is useful to you, the kind that gives you a real number instead of a headline number, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I publish a new video like this every week, always grounded in what the research actually shows, not what gets the most clicks. And if someone in your life uses coconut oil or coconut milk every day, thinking it's the healthiest option on the shelf, send them this video. It might be exactly the kind of small correction that helps them down the road. This video is for general education, not personal medical advice. Cholesterol management depends on your full health picture. Genetics, medications, other conditions, and dietary fat is only one part of that picture. If you're on a cholesterol medication, or you have a diagnosed heart condition, talk to your doctor before making significant dietary changes. And don't stop any prescribed medication based on a dietary swap alone. I'm Dr. John Paul. Small, honest changes, done consistently, tend to beat dramatic promises, and this is one of the few dietary swaps where the research actually backs that up.